Our next speaker is Fiona Robertson, and she's a disability rights activist from Aberdeen. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Yvonne. Yeah, you kind of brought up a number of my points already. So thank you for that. And I especially liked the Titanic analogy. I think that that is a really powerful and useful way to look at how we might all be in the same situation, but it affects some people in a very different way. So my experience is that a year ago tomorrow, I went out for my birthday night out with my friends. We already knew it was the last time we'd see each other for some time, but people were still talking about it as a bit of a weird thing. Most people were. But by this point, disabled people were already trying to raise the alarm. A few days after that night, I wrote a blog post and a series of threads begging people to listen to disabled people because the UK government had begun talking about their herd immunity strategy. We were still talking about the virus as if its course was get it and either recover or die. That is not true. The other course was not die, but not recover either, or recover, but not to previous health. The disability community is full of people who got there because of the aftermath of viruses. Previously healthy people who, long after the virus itself was gone, were living with pain, exhaustion, cognitive dysfunction, and a whole host of other symptoms. When I was 19, I woke up one day and I couldn't walk properly. Over the next few months, my ability to function disappeared day by day until I was mostly bedbound. As a young woman with pain and exhaustion, I was told, of course, that it was attention seeking or psychosomatic or lying. Eventually, they decided it was either the result of a head injury or post-viral fatigue syndrome caused by a severe bout of flu. I had recovered, but it had taken a toll. Many years later, I would discover that it wasn't just ME, but the post-viral effects had triggered an underlying genetic condition that I had, that I have. Most people with my condition go through their lives just being a bit bendy, but something like a virus or a major injury can trigger an acute form of it. Viruses can have catastrophic ongoing effects on a person's health long after they've technically recovered from them. I lost everything. I had been studying theoretical physics, a career I had worked my life towards, and I have never been able to get back to it because the cognitive dysfunction makes the complex maths out of my reach. Even though I can walk again now, I need to use a stick, and I live with chronic pain, immune and gastrointestinal issues, and that's 20 years later. So it's not like we didn't have warning that long COVID would exist, even if it was just disabled people warning about it at the time. The SARS outbreak in 2004, it was another coronavirus, and we had data about the lasting effects on a large percentage of the people who had recovered from it. After 2 years, many were still experiencing ongoing fatigue. Many needed medication to stay employed. Many had not made it back to work at all. A year ago, I wrote, "This is one of the major reasons Boris's herd immunity idea was so catastrophically dangerous. Just letting everyone get it will lead to a massive uptick in people experiencing post-viral symptoms, many of whom will go on to become permanently disabled. There are also going to be people becoming disabled because they have conditions which are going unmanaged in the chaos, that are secondary risks to the virus. And those people will all then be entering a system designed to cause trauma and hardship at the exact same time. The DWP already couldn't process what it needs to process because the system has been designed to be inaccessible." At the time, we begged the DWP to suspend protocols requiring the assumption of fraud. We asked them to pour resources into making sure newly disabled people were able to get the rest they needed in order to avoid worsening post-viral fatigue symptoms, which risked turning them into chronic conditions. We wanted waiting times to be slashed, the presumption against the applicant abolished, interim measures to provide for applicants to be available from the moment of application while waiting for it to be processed. But we were ignored. There was a failure to understand this reality and plan for it at the beginning, instead of when a whole lot of people discovered for themselves what grave and systematic violations of the human rights of disabled people actually means. As the first articles about long COVID began to show up, with people calling it mysterious, our focus shifted somewhat. A few people suggested something I genuinely think is a good idea, that every long COVID patient should be assigned a mentor with ME to teach them how to navigate the systems and how to advocate for themselves with doctors and how to recognize and recover their own sense of self in a world where we're programmed to believe a disabled life is worthless. That last part, unfortunately, turned out to be true. Other things we warned about at the beginning, because our experiences with the medical profession are not the same as abled people's experiences, were the prioritizing of able people's lives, even when there was no difference in likelihood to survive, the assumption that a disabled person's life was of lower quality, ignoring us raising concerns about our conditions. We know now that a disabled man in England and Wales is more than 6 times as likely to die of COVID, and disabled women 10 times as likely. We don't have numbers for Scotland. We also know from long experience that women are not believed when we report concerns and symptoms. And these two things are not likely to be unrelated. Nearly 2/3 of the people who've died from COVID were disabled. And everywhere for a year, we've seen what was previously hidden under veils of politeness and euphemisms become clear. We are expendable if it saves the economy, if it means able people aren't inconvenienced. Even now, the rush to reopen everything while sentencing disabled people to never leaving their homes again is being pushed by people with power while we keep yelling from the sidelines. Everything in the next term of government will be affected by this catastrophic failure to contain the virus. We didn't have enough accessible housing to begin with. We didn't have an accessible infrastructure to begin with. And as a lot of people, particularly women, people of color, and already disabled people are discovering, the medical system does not deal well with post-viral chronic conditions like this. They are still recommending treatments known to worsen conditions, still referring to it as controversial. And even the ones who recognize the severity of it are saying things like, this isn't a post-viral syndrome, this is real. In terms of what we need to do next, disabled people must be at the heart of this. Imagine how different all of this could have unfolded if disabled people had been listened to over the years. Remote learning and working, which we have been told was literally impossible, would have been already in place and ready to scale up, with the associated safeguards like employers paying for increased bills at home, possible harms and isolation already addressed and understood with solutions in place, and crucially, a medical and social security system ready to deal with the challenges of chronic illnesses and the decisions on how support needs to be given. There are opportunities coming out of this. Making sure flexibility is built into work and education, different approaches to social lives and interactions, more awareness of the effects of isolation which disabled people have been living with all along, and community solutions to that prioritized, and a transformation in how medical professionals see people who have long-term conditions which are not easily managed and not easily cured. The respect and recognition of mutual aid groups is one of the most positive effects I've seen come out of this, but they need to continue and be organized and resourced. All of that requires putting disability justice at the heart of the programs. There is nothing this won't affect. Work, business, housing, the economy, health and social care, community endeavors, so many of which ran on volunteers who were in vulnerable groups and have now died. We are also aware of how quickly we'll be forgotten again if everything just goes back to normal, and how quickly it's assumed it's okay with us that we'll just shield forever while the virus continues to move through the population, even while measures put in place to mitigate lockdowns are stripped away. We already struggled getting out into our communities and our lives. Please don't sentence us to an even more isolated and an even more high-risk life, when if we'd just been listened to in the first place, we might have been able to avoid so many of the terrible effects of this pandemic. As a quick note for anyone who is experiencing long-term conditions, the one thing that people need to understand is do not push yourself to recover faster. Take the time that you need in order to recover slower. It unfortunately is not being well supported by the government, but if you can, if there's any way to, don't push yourself. Don't listen to the cultural programming of just do a bit more every day. People with these conditions, with post-viral conditions, it can make your symptoms significantly worse, worse than they need to be. Almost everyone I know with conditions like this, me included, made themselves much sicker than necessary because we thought that we had to just push through it. I ended up needing full-time care for 3 years. And it mainly because I believed people who told me I wasn't trying hard enough to get better. So give your body time to heal and speak to the disability community for support and ideas, because we've all been there. The culture's approach to recovery is not great. But people don't know that until it's too late. So come to us, we can give you advice, we can talk to you. If you look for disability Twitter, then that's a good place to find us. I didn't learn about any of this until I've been sick for years. I didn't realize there were systemic issues with the way women with chronic conditions are treated. And these are things that so many people are about to start experiencing. The key is to work with your body, learn its cues, when it's telling you it can't do anymore, when it can be pushed and when it really can't. But crucially, your life will be different from before, but that doesn't mean it's a tragedy. You can build an amazing life with new circumstances if you're willing to adapt. I may not be a physicist, but my life is rich and meaningful in ways that I could never have imagined. Don't waste years and the energy you do have fixating on thinking of how your life should look or trying to get back to where you were before. Work with your body. Your life may well return to normal after a period of time, and that's fantastic. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. Learn to ask for help and receive help with humor and love. It's a hard lesson in our culture, which prioritizes individualism and says that needing help is weakness. Everyone needs help. This nightmare should have shown how much we rely on other people. And if there's anything that we can bring out of this whole pandemic, it's that we are all connected, that we all rely on each other for our lives to be safe and for our lives to be meaningful and for us to be able to do our work. And some people, as Yvonne was saying, have already been excluded. We were never part of this to begin with. And if we were, then a lot of what has happened could have been avoided. So those lessons can be used going into this campaign, going into whatever we build coming out of it. If you prioritize the people who've been excluded, then we know what needs to be fixed.